Hello, and welcome once again to the Dental Marketing Mastery Series. This podcast is brought to you by dentalwebcontent.com and New Patients Incorporated. I'm Howie Horrocks, the founder of New Patients Incorporated. Along with me once again is my friend and partner and the president of New Patients Incorporated, Mark Dilatush. Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to our podcast. And with me again on the other side of the country is our good buddy, Mark Dilatush. How you doing, Mark?
Hello, Howie. How are you?
I'm good. Good.
It's the end of February, almost March, almost time to see the boat again.
Oh, the boat.
Yes, I know. I have to, this whole winter thing is, somebody has to fix this whole winter thing.
Oh, yeah.
Where the water gets hard and you can't really fish in it because, it's just a very depressing time of year. But this time of year, just before the spring, is wonderful.
I remember last year your dock got frozen in the lake.
Yeah. It's not really a subject for a podcast, but if you want to see if you want to see the power and the pressure of ice, leave your iron poles holding your dock up when the water is a little too high, and yeah, it's amazing. I basically just twisted it into a pretzel. So,
all right. Well, what we're going to talk about today is, all of you listeners out there, we monitor the various dental forums, and we participate in them too.
We're watching you.
Yeah, and and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And occasionally, or more than occasionally, there are some very good questions that pop up on these forums. So, and we spied one the other day, and I wanted to sort of summarize it. That the doctor's basically saying, I live in a smaller town where almost no dentists advertise. There's a corporate clinic, and there's some fairly heavy advertising from that one source, but there's no large number of competitors that are vying for this market. And he's asking if he's right to feel like his market is untapped, and what would we suggest to be the best way to advertise in that kind of a situation? That's a pretty good question, actually.
Yeah, we don't run into that.
Yeah, usually it's heavily competitive.
Right. Well, it was the post itself was kind of funny because the doctor said, I think my market's untapped because nobody's doing any advertising. And then he listed out 7 ways people were advertising. So that was, it was kind of, it was different. Like you had to read through the whole thing in order to really understand what his question was. So anyway, okay, so you're in a really good doctor-patient ratio. And yeah, you have one corporate entity and they're just pounding the marketing. And it's very predictable what part of the market they're going after. They're going after the shoppers, and that's fine.
Right, and they want to wrap it all up. Right? Roll all those patients up into their corral.
Right.
Yeah.
Which they won't ever, but that's okay. They don't know that yet. So the doctor's sitting there going, "Hey, man, I might have a great opportunity here." And really, the question is if that is the opportunity, what would you do with the opportunity? All right. So the first answer to your question is to quantify the opportunity. Is it a 1 to 2,000 or a 1 to 6,000? Is there one dentist for every 2,000 human beings, or one dentist for every 6,000 human beings? Because the answer to that will dictate how aggressive you are. Which normally leads us to the first counterintuitive thought. Most dentists believe that if you're in a really, really good dental market, that you don't have to be aggressive. And Howie and I would say, if you're in a really, really good dental market, you are not the only dentist to find it. So you should spend the first 2 years of your existence overplaying your advertising hand in order to capture as much of the piece of that market as you want in as short a time as you can, because like I said, there's brokers out there. There's people looking for startups. There's people looking for opportunities, and people running demographics on probably every dentist market that's listening to this right now. So you're not the only one. And if you're in a great market, you found one, then you want to capture as much of it in as short a period of time as possible.
Yeah, if you're in a great market, you can be sure that somebody else is going to find it too,
right?
And you'll get some company. So
right. So, and which is fine. They're the companies that having colleagues that serve the same market's not normally an issue until it gets to be to the point where it's a 1 to 600, and everybody's running around asking each other if they have patients because there's no patients to go around. But that's not the case here. The case is, hey, I think I have a pretty untapped market. What should I do? So the first answer to the question is quantify your market. Make sure you know what that number is. The second step is if it's like grossly uncompetitive, like a 1 to 3 or 4 or 5,000, then the higher you go with that number, the more money you scrape together and pour into advertising your first X couple of years, however many years you either are in the practice or starting up in that market, or if you're an established dentist and you just woke up today and said, hey, maybe I'll market. The number of how much advertising money you can scrape together and then add about 20% to it. And because the more you spend in the shorter period of time, that's going to be the greater liftoff. The shortest point to the bottom of the bell curve to the top of the bell curve. And it's going to allow you to pull in that market share again, before a new competitor comes in down the street. We just opened a practice in a Kansas City suburb in October of 2017. And they're in a 1 to 1,300 market. I mean, you can do this anywhere. I'm not saying you can't. But if they had come to us and said, Mark, we're in a 1 to 4,000 market, I would have told that doctor, double or triple your marketing budget. Not because, the money just goes through us. It doesn't go to us. Howie and I don't sit there counting the dollars, right? We're not going to retire if the marketing budget's higher, right? So, but that would have absolutely been our counsel to that doctor and every other doctor that happens to be in a great new market, or they wake up one day and decide they want to start advertising and they realize, hey, it's not very competitive around here. Awesome. Yeah. Right. Yeah, good. Why didn't you wake up a year before? But that's okay. If you just woke up today and found yourself in a good market, then overspend at the beginning of your career in having a orchestrated, managed, cohesive, coherent marketing plan. Just to overspend. If you find yourself in that kind of a market, your risk is really low, your reward is really high, and anytime you combine those two, you end up with an overspend market. Beyond that, and then you go right down. You just keep, just like we've always said. Howie, do you remember what podcast number this is? It's like 89 or something.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah. So for 89 podcasts, at some point in and among them, we've told you on a continual basis to pay attention to your marketing foundation. Your marketing foundation is where you start to exploit a really non-competitive market. You have to do your internal promotions properly, assuming it's not a startup. You have to have a solid web presence, which is a website. SEO will work fine in even a rural area. SEO will drive consumer searches to your website as a choice. Your review and online rep matters in Montana just as much as it matters in New York City. So those are two pieces of your three. Those are your foundations.
in a market like that, if that corporate facility is doing their own TV, radio, mail, whatever they're doing, I know that they are using price to drive a response. And everyone listening to this is going to, hopefully, if you've been listening to us for a long time, come to realize Mark's going to say the exact opposite. Do the exact opposite of what that corporate facility is doing. Target the exact opposite side of the spectrum. Save your money. Stop mailing to everyone on the planet. And do not use price to drive a phone call. Only deliver your messages on a continual basis to only the households in your general vicinity who are going to turn into the best revenue resources, the best revenue driving patients available to all the dentists in your market. Makes sense to reach out and hug the top 40% and keep your advertising dollars going in that direction.
Yep, it's the old target the top half of the dental market, like we've been talking about forever.
Exactly. So now we get budget. Now budget comes in, right? So you say, all right, well, maybe you need a new website. Maybe you need a better SEO person. Maybe you need someone to handle your mail. Maybe you need someone to handle your internal projects. We do all those things. But if you want a robust budget, if those three things are not in place, use your budget to get those three things in place, because those three things, the internal, the internet, and your mail, those three things are all going to work together wonderfully in a very predictable way for a long period of time. If you ever need to jump off of that and do something additional, like, I don't know, Facebook ads, maybe some Google PPC ads, maybe there's some print opportunities, local newsletters, maybe there's, I don't know, whatever other opportunities there are in the future, we can always add to that foundation. But it's very similar to building a home. You build your foundation first, then you build your home. And if you want an addition later, you add on an addition, right? But you always have the main structure, the foundation to build upon. Okay, you don't just skip those steps and go straight to billboards. That almost never works. Well, I'm not going to say I've never seen it work, because I have, but it's like, I don't know, twice in 29 years. So, it's kind of like,
it's very risky.
It's kind of like betting on 00 on a roulette.
There you go.
Wheel and just standing there until it hits. You know what I mean? So for someone who asks us that kind of question, it is counterintuitive to most folks when we say be aggressive. On the flip side, we get engaged, probably 8 out of 10 people who engage us to help them are in either competitive environments or grossly competitive environments, right? In other words, it's like I say to everybody back here, we're normally not the first company people choose. We're normally like the 7th. Because it seems like everybody who has a basement and a computer these days is calling themselves a dental marketing firm, right? So dentists go from this person to that person. And pretty soon they end up to the point where, like, why don't I have one place do this stuff for me? Or, they're kind of disillusioned with maybe the calls or the results or the patients or whatever that's producing isn't what the doctor's, ultimately wanting. And then they end up hearing about us and they end up calling us. And when they do, they tend to be in competitive to grossly competitive dental markets. And they need, a bit more help than the average person in their basement can provide. So
yeah, and they've already gone through the whole try this, try that routine that we've talked about before. I'll try this. Right. No, that didn't work. I'll try that. Oh, gee, that didn't work so well either.
Right.
And they're throwing all of these very expensive darts at the dartboard. They're not hitting the mark, and it's at that point that the light usually goes on that something's not right here.
Right.
It's not working. Chasing shiny objects, it's not working. Anyway, why don't we take a break here, Mark, and we'll come back and we'll talk more about what we can do for that group of practices. Okay?
You got it.
All right. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Hey, Mark, how would our audience find out about getting more good reviews?
Well, first step is to understand it. There's minefields in the dental business right now. So let me give you the 4 keys. 1, has to be simple for your staff. They can actually call in sick and it'll still work. 2, it has to be ridiculously simple for your patients to leave Google reviews. 3, it has to be able to separate out the not so good reviews from the great reviews and only send the great reviewers over to your Google, Facebook, or Yelp. And 4, and this is probably the most important, only send reviews to platforms where your reviews cannot be taken away. If anybody has any questions about this, it's called NPI Crusader. You can just send Howie and I an email, or actually you can log on to newpatientsinc.com and you can schedule your very own appointment to see it in an online meeting that usually takes 15 to 20 minutes. So most people do it over a lunchtime.
All right, we are back, and we were talking about being in a very competitive market and maybe a not so competitive market, and the differences or the similarities in how you approach that, right, Mark?
Yeah, it's we've had we like I said before the break, we normally get engaged with people who are in competitive or highly competitive markets because they've tried this and that, or they've tried this marketing person or that marketing person, and nothing really on its own worked out. And there's a few reasons for that. Number 1, like I said before, you need that foundation. And if you have one person doing this and one person doing that, one person doing this, it's not cohesive. It's not orchestrated. It's not scheduled. It all needs to kind of work together, right? So that's one reason. Another reason is, many times, it is the budget only holds so much. And it's funny when you go to a marketing firm not named NPI, it's amazing that the money that you have in your budget, the money available for advertising, just happens to always be exactly the number that they need to spend in order to get your phone to ring. Right?
Exactly. It's so odd.
Isn't it funny how it lines up like that? So, and it's kind of sad, but anyway, so it's counterintuitive to a dentist who's sitting in a 1 to 900 market to hear us say, okay, we're going to take this slowly and conservatively, and we're going to plan year over year increases to your budget, but we have to get a baseline of performance out of this market before we put too much of your money at risk, right? And the doctors look at us like, where the hell did you come from?
Yeah.
Because everybody else I've ever talked to said, yeah, 30 grand a year is exactly what we need, right? And it just never seemed to work out that way. Well, here's the bottom line. In a non-competitive market, you overspend. In a competitive market, you might want to take a bit more time and spend average at the very beginning just to get your baseline. Because once you get a baseline, it's kind of like I used an analogy all the time. It's like a volume knob on a radio. If you turn on a radio station and you're listening to the music or whatever you're listening to, and you can hear it, right? But you just want more volume, you just turn the volume up. Okay. Well, the same thing holds true when marketing a dental practice. If you establish your foundation and you can see the phone calls, you can hear the phone calls, you can listen to the phone call, you have verifiable evidence all the way along the entire path from consumer to patient to paying patient in your chair, right? You can see that whole process unfold in front of you. Even if it's only 4 new patients a month or 5 new patients a month, if they're worth whatever, $1,800 a piece at the end of the year, you got an ROI building, right? So in those competitive markets where you may only get 4 or 5 or 6, really good new patients a month, start there. Get your baseline down. Understand what your average acquisition cost is. Understand what your first year ROI is. Now, you've all heard us say the first year ROI is not all your ROI is not even close, but measuring it is important. So in competitive markets or ultra competitive markets, we may say, let's go conservatively with a very few exceptions. There are dentists out there that we've run into over the years. I'd say more than a handful. I don't know, 40, 50, let's say, that understand they're in ultra competitive markets, really understand how that impacts. Supply and demand impacts everything that you sell. It doesn't, and everything that you market and everything that you advertise. Anybody that says it doesn't is basically flat out lying to you.
You can't repeal that law.
It's math, right? So anyway, it is infrequent, but every once in a while, a dentist will engage us in a very ultra competitive market and say, Mark, look, I tried this. I tried that. I tried this other thing. Actually, over the last dozen years, I think I've tried almost everything I can possibly try. And, some of it worked. Some of it worked short term. Some of it worked for 6 months and then failed. Some of it worked for 2 years and then failed. Some of it worked. Some of it never worked, right? And whenever we get that question, we say, okay, well, let's do this right, but let's understand the first year, all we're trying to do is get a baseline, and then we can turn the volume up. That's that reference I used before, is turning the volume up. And then sometimes the doctor comes back and says, no, hell with that. I want you to turn the volume up, and I want to keep the volume up. This is my market. I started here 20, 25 years ago. These young guys came in here, started advertising. They're taking my patients away. I want a 4-mile radius around my practice to claim it's mine. Every once in a while, we'll get a doctor who says that. Okay. Yep. And in those cases, then obviously the gloves are off. It's time to play. And, nobody really wants to play in our, nobody really wants to play in our,
backyard.
In our backyard, right? When a dentist comes to us and says that, because
sandbox.
Yeah, our sandbox. Yeah, they don't want to be in our sandbox. So here's the bottom line there. In that situation, ultra competitive environment, Mark and Howie would probably say, all right, look, doc, let's just get a baseline, because you can tell they're kind of hurt, like on the phone. They're frustrated. They're hurt almost by not finding the advertising that's going to work for them, and they're not going to move. They either lease, they have a 5-year lease, or they own the building, whatever. They're not going to physically pick up their practice, their family, their 25 years invested in the community and just leave. They're not going to do that, right? So they're going to stay and fight. We will almost always say start off slow. But there are a few dentists who come in and say, no, Mark, I read your books or listen to you guys, and I understand what I'm up against, and I understand the risks, and I'm not moving. And there's nothing these guys can do to make me move. So I'm going to stay, I'm going to fight, and I'm going to grab that top 40 for me and let everybody else, take a race to the bottom with their deals.
Yeah.
We actually have, you know what, how we probably have 60, 70, maybe 80 clients in that category. It's probably more than 50, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, the question from the forum was, hey, I think I'm in an untapped market. That's wrong. You're never in an untapped market. Then he said, we have this big corporate facility. That'll tell you right there it's not an untapped market. And they see that this person sees a whole bunch of advertising from this big corporate facility. Now we know for sure it's going to be price-based, and we know for sure the moms in the bottom half of the market will respond to that, and that's fine. Those are the moms that entity can take. We know We know for sure that that corporate facility has an internet position. We know for sure that that internet position is going to be, optimized. Most do have some kind of Google AdWord campaign. And that AdWord campaign will be based primarily on a price incentive. So there's a whole bunch of knowns going into here to tell me that this is not an untapped market. An untapped market to me is like, remember the good old days, Howie, like 15, 20 years ago, doctor from Indiana somewhere would call us up and we're like, wow, we've never heard of a dentist in that part of Indiana. Right? And then,
they really need a dentist here.
Yeah, I know, really. And then, Lori, Dr. Cockley out in Pennsylvania she was probably from 10 years ago, I guess, maybe 9 or 10 years ago. And, she called us after the first wave, after we dropped the first wave on the market. And she said, stop, I can't take any more. Right. So, those are the good old days. The good old days are, they're not gone by any stretch of the imagination, but it's pretty difficult to find, I'm just basically an untapped dental market that anyone would want to live, right?
Yeah.
With human beings that actually want, need, and
I hear the North Pole is kind of untapped.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's getting they're fewer and farther between, but they're out there still.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the guy that posted this, we wish him well. I forget his name. But if you're out there in the dental forum land, make note, Mark and Howie are watching. Actually, wait a second. This is a good plug. Good time to plug. If you're listening to the podcast and you're not a member of the Dental Marketing Mastery Facebook group, I know you probably get dragged into 9,000 Facebook groups, and we're not going to drag you into anything, but there are really good, meaty learning conversations going on from time to time in Dental Marketing Mastery Facebook groups. So if you just want to learn at your leisure, like you don't want to listen to a half-hour podcast, you just want to kind of read what's going on with other dentists and what challenges they're having, and how Mark and Howie and the rest of the team are explaining things, explaining what they're seeing, basically, is kind of what we do all day. It doesn't cost anything. Just, come onto the Dental Marketing Mastery Facebook group and say hello and be part of the conversation. Some of those conversations get quite intense. We just had an intense conversation on Google AdWords the other day. So,
yeah. All right, my friends. We'll see you again next time. And actually, Mark, I found out this was the 91st podcast. So, all of you out there, tune in next week for the 92nd, and on we go. Thanks a lot. Bye now. We hope you've enjoyed our podcast today. You can find more podcasts on our YouTube channel, on Stitcher, and iTunes. Also on our websites, dentalwebcontent.com and newpatientsinc.com.